it. We're here, episode 2. I'm excited to chat with you again.
Me too, Cheryl. This was 3 times the charm to try and make this work today, I think. Which actually I think is a interesting thing, because the topic of our conversation is self-awareness. And I think you had some self-awareness moments last week when we were going to schedule and take time to create episode 2 of this podcast. And I think it would be a good segue into the conversation if you want to kind of give that that insight, and we can build off that.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely, because I feel like this is something a lot of people face. You know, you wake up with your day ahead of you, and sometimes you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and look at the day ahead of you and go, wait a minute, how am I going to pull this off? And that's what happened to me. You know, it's here, you probably heard in the news. I mean, it's definitely in the news. It's kind of intense here in the West Coast with the wildfires and everything else going on. And, you know, it's been pretty disruptive, and school starting and the wildfires, et cetera. And I woke up I didn't have a good night's sleep. I had an early start. So maybe not great planning on my part. And I just knew it wasn't going to be like the best. I wasn't going to be in the best place for our conversation. And the old me would have just powered through, like white knuckle it, get through it. You know, you made this commitment. And now I think to myself, you know, hey, I'll just ask, right? Like maybe Larry's really committed to doing this today and it's going to say, come on, Cheryl, power through. Or maybe Larry's going to say, let's put it off. And so I just asked, hey, you know, I'm not feeling great today. I don't think I'm going to show up as my best self. What do you think about rescheduling? And what did you say?
Yeah. And I said, sure. You know, let's not force it. And, you know, and I think that that summarizes the key to the concept of self-awareness, right? I think it's self-awareness allows us to ask better questions, right? And so you not feeling up to it and asking the question to me gave you more information to kind of say, you know what's the right thing to do here, right? Yeah. And that led to a decision. And honestly, the week that we delayed it gave me more time for reflection on the topic, and I actually feel more insightful into what my message about self-awareness is about. And so I think in you having the willingness to speak up and make that change, I think actually helped everybody, you know, when it comes to that. So, you know, why don't we kind of just level set quickly the agenda here? I think the idea around self-awareness and what you just described is a great example of it, and encompasses you know, a good reason to practice it. But I think we need to start with taking a step back and say, well, what does self-awareness really mean, right? What is it? What is that definition? And then from there, kind of talk into tool sets and ways to practice it to get to the level of you know, results that we're trying to encompass. Yeah. So why don't we start with a question? So self-awareness, what does that mean to you? What is, you know, why is that practice something of importance to you and drives you to do it?
Yeah, Larry, I know you've thought a lot about this too for yourself. And I wanted to say as well, like, I think having that extra time, and the more that we've been talking, you know, the first episode sort of touched on self-awareness. And, you know, I told the story of, you know, sort of feeling physically anxious and noticing that, and how discipline around mindfulness really has built up this self-awareness within myself. But I also find it's just like this onion, and I keep peeling these layers, and it goes deeper and deeper, and it's so powerful. It's such a powerful thing, right? When you kind of wake up to self-awareness, and And a lot of times the people who are really into mindfulness and meditation, they, there's a book called Wake Up, because that's like the message is that for, a lot of us, we're just moving in a trance, like moving through our lives in a trance, not really aware of body sensations or aware of the voice in our head or aware of these things. So to me, that's self-awareness, is starting to really be able to tap into the body sensations you're feeling, or the voices in your head. I have a good story for you about that later. So that you can wake up to, where you are here and now and who you are, but over to you, because I know you've thought about this a lot, and I'm really excited to hear your perspective on self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. So self-awareness really starts for me on a spiritual level, I guess, for lack of a better word. I look at life and I look at humans and I say that what makes us unique, right? And it's consciousness, right? We have consciousness. We have the ability to choose. We have freedom to choose based on the fact that we possess consciousness. And what does really consciousness, allow us to do? It allows us to be able to respond to our situations instead of react, right? And I think when you look at the rest of nature and you see like animals, for instance, right? Like they intuitively respond to their environments, right? We have an option to choose in those, but still possess the intuitive knowledge and feedback that animals possess as well too. So having this unique ability, pairing that with what we're given, right, which is our mental, spiritual, physical, and emotional bodies, it allows us to explore and make choices in this world that suit our purpose. And when we look at self-awareness, and it's said a lot out there, I think when you are able to realize, and this is how I look at it from an identity perspective, that I am this conscious being with the ability to choose and have the freedom to explore the world. So I start from that point, and then I then use that self-awareness to be able to make good choices, to respond to my situations versus react. Because at the end of the day, that consciousness, that self-awareness gift that we have, comes with responsibility, right? As much as it's awesome and having this amazing freedom, the world out there, and especially the way society is and all that stuff, they could be feeding things to you that if you're not practicing self-awareness, you can get caught in, and be tricked by, and get in this constant reaction mode, or actually get caught in addictions and other things that, the initial reaction feels good, but then an hour later you don't feel good, right? So when I start with self-awareness on this, this beautiful gift that I have, and realize that my inner world, which is what self-awareness is, that exploration is just as important as how I view the external world. And so I want to keep a proper balance between the two. And I know that everything starts with that inner world first, because then I can make better choices about how I interact with the external world, and also protect myself from potential dangers out there that could creep up in my subconscious and, make us do things that we're not necessarily happy with, or don't align with our purpose, or, our identity of who we want to be in the world. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That so reflects, the journey that I've been on when I think about my journey with self-awareness, and that's where I think about it. It's like that unfolding I talked about, and it starts with, just for me, that story I told last episode of noticing the anxiety and being able to like inquire and be curious about it, and then it kind of dissipates, and that helps a lot, right? Because that could have been a moment, and that in the past would have been a moment that maybe I would have reached for something to kind of numb the anxiety. And I think that's a pretty it's a pretty human reaction to these kinds of emotions. I feel like that's kind of step one. Like that's the first, the outer layer is just that being able to notice those things and find more wise responses, you know, to that feeling of anxiety. And then step two, it's like you start to become, like you were saying, wiser about how you interact with others in the outside world. So there's like your own internal experience, and then there's you in relation to the outside world. And, you know, developing that self-awareness, I think definitely I have seen has allowed me to react to others in a much, you know, in a much more thoughtful and mindful way, and not in a reactive way, you know, like in a moment of conflict, for example.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of the reason why it's a hot topic and it's always brought up and it's of importance, and we feel, you know, I personally see a lot of people struggle with it. And, you know, I think when we talk about that concept of going inward and, you know, maybe practicing meditation or other stuff, you hear about these tools and practices for self-awareness. I think there's a lot of conditioning that goes on from the time that we're kids, that we're taught to, education is about the external world and how things are, and we take it in, and we are kind of, I think, not intentionally thinking that what someone says to me, or someone says I have to be, or what I should do, or what I should follow, without further exploration and having an opinion for yourself, or thinking about it for yourself and what it means to you. I think I don't think that's brought to the forefront of what education is really about, right? Like you go out, you experience something in the external world, and now how you interact with that, you know, is a personal experience, right? So now, you know, I go and I learn something. Now it's got to tie back. Well, what do I think about that? Why am I doing what's important for me to doing? And then that drives me to either continue with that direction or not. And I think that we get conditioned a lot of time to just hear the outside tell us how we should do things, or how we should think, or how we should act, or what's good for us, what's bad for us. When it really, you know, there's very few absolute truths out there. We need to take the time to look at that and realize that our interpretation of that makes us unique, and then that makes our unique impression on this world, right? And that self-awareness for me allows me to do that. It allows me to make better choices. It allows me to pay attention to the things that I do that's not in alignment with my purpose, right? And what gives me good energy, right? You know, and I can point to, you know, whether it be getting caught on technology, right? Or, you know, going for you know, for chocolate, right? Or wine, or whatever the case might be. The decisions that I make are because of the sensations that I feel from it. I get a feeling from it. I get some type of reaction to it. What I need to realize is I want the feel good feeling, but is the external world giving it to me in a healthy way? And then I can make better choices from that. And self-awareness is always the starting point to change, right? And that to me is the main reason to do it. And it's universal, right? Because it means something different in what you do, but looking internal, I think, is universal for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what I've found too, and I don't know if you found this, but I'm sure you have, but in your own way, right? But what I found is that the more I've sort of developed my own tools around self-awareness, right, and understanding what I like to refer to as the human condition, the fact that each and every one of us have, like, there's us, there's the who we are, and then there's the monkey mind. There's like that voice in our head that can steer us off course. We all battle with that. Like every human in this planet battles with that, with that mind that wants to take them off into the past and into the future and into worry and into fantasy. Right. And So the more that I've developed an understanding of my own self, right, and what it is to be human and what the human struggle is, and how to develop tools to kind of, you know, reduce suffering, you know, in that way, the more I can empathize with, appreciate that the person on the other, like across the table from me or what have you, is also struggling with that. You know, one of my close friends has a saying that he told me a long time ago that I always hold in my heart, because it's important to do so, I think, and that is hurting people hurt. Because sometimes when someone is inflicting a hurt on you, you want to react and hurt them back. But the fact is, it's not hurting you. They're not trying to hurt you. They're just hurting themselves, and they're lashing out, and they maybe don't have the tools to really understand why they're in pain. And I've found that has continued to be really useful for me, like understanding that some people are suffering and they don't yet have the tools, and they're going to lash out, and lashing back out at them is not going to help anyone, right? But also letting them hurt you doesn't help. So how do you be in your, like, I think about this for myself, like, how do I exist in my self-awareness, understand that this person is lashing out, and protect myself while not harming them back, right? Not adding to the suffering, is something that I've found to be very true. And right now, because, like, I'll be honest, the pandemic, everything that's going on, people are unraveling. It is not good, right? So there are people around me and in my world that are suffering and that are lashing out. And it's really been important for me to be able to, like, okay, they're suffering, so I'm not gonna not gonna do anything back in return other than make sure they're okay, but also make sure I'm okay, right?
Yeah. That's a really, really great point, because I think one of the core components of self-awareness is understanding what our identity is, right? What do we associate ourselves with, right? I think at the beginning, when I mentioned about, what is self-awareness, it's a tie to consciousness, right? You are a conscious being, having freedom to explore, right? And I think the concept of I am, that you hear in a lot of religious, discussions of spirituality and whatnot, I am is removing conditions, removing belief systems, removing identity, right? Because immediately when you're born, you are associated with the identity of the name that your parents give you, right? So automatically, what does that mean for me? What I think happens for a lot of people is, as you start to live, you start to, your identity starts to morph and change, and so you start attaching to beliefs. So the whole concept of detachment, right, is realizing that when something crosses an unhealthy threshold, that's when you start to see these negative emotions start to creep up. That's when you start to react without responding. That's when you start to get angry at the responses of others, right? I know we've talked a decent amount about, self-love, right? It all comes back to that, having self-love for ourselves and saying, I am this unique being. I will make mistakes. And I'm going to do my best every day to minimize the suffering that comes along with the belief systems that are hurting me and no longer serving me. And the only way that you can unravel them and disassociate from something that you're attaching to who you are, your identity, and a great example of that is identifying with being a victim, right? When you identify with being a victim, you now are putting yourself in a situation where you have a crutch to use, and giving you a reason to not explore, why you associate with that and how to grow from that. And that causes you to react a heck of a lot more It gets you very emotional. I think it causes anxiety, depression. I mean, you name it. You hear the stories of, when people associate with being a victim, and why it's so important when you hear psychologists and doctors talk about that is what they want to do when they do have someone who was a victim of something, is to remove that association, right? And so it takes self-awareness to get yourself there, right? It takes a moment in time to be able to say, wait a second, that's not me. I love myself. I can go do whatever it is I want to do, right? I have all the opportunity in the world, right? And when you have that pause and you have that moment, whether you're at the early stage of healing and growth or whether it's midway through, it is the stepping stone and continues down a path that you now can choose. It gives you choices. It gives you options.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that you brought that up because I think it's so important right now, especially because just so much of what, people are sort of railing against is really out of their individual control. I mean, there's some collective responses we can have to things like climate change and the wildfires, but as an individual, we're feeling very, ooh, wait a minute, what's happening around me that is outside my control? And what is it like to feel, to be feeling a victim of that, right? And I agree. I think identifying as a victim and sort of having this sort of competition of who's the more victimized, amongst us, it doesn't help any of us. And when I think about, like, I was just thinking too about the hero's journey, and also I've read also about the heroine's journey, which I think is a unique perspective and a unique journey that we follow too, I think, as female identifying folks. But that's at the essence of the hero's journey, is that, no matter what life throws at you, you transcend, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the most inspiring people in my life and my circle are the folks that have really come up against tremendous challenge and have transcended. And I think that comes through, to your point, self-awareness and in developing an understanding of the human condition, right? And the fact that these are just, since, thousands and thousands of years ago when Buddha was sitting, on a mound, like there was already this understanding, like these ideas are not new, right? They get repackaged and resold, right, on a regular basis.
Right.
But they're not new. These are ancient understandings and ancient ideas that this is the human condition. And these are the tools that you can use to sort of transcend out of that. And it gets me thinking, because I love, I was just doing a little bit of reading and researching and reminding myself of, especially when you think of this topic of self-awareness leading into self-love and really love of others, is Tara Brach talks about the trance of unworthiness. Because when I think about this concept, right, of the trance of unworthiness and the fact that so many of us move through life feeling this way. Like, you don't know how many people I know who are, from the outside looking in, successful, talented, accomplished. They have all these things like check, 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 and still have deep inside this sense of unworthiness. It pains me, right? That is a thing that it's still so many folks struggle with. And when I think about it when I think about my daughter, right, she's 13, and I feel like that age is where a lot of young people go from this, that sort of, when they're little, they're just like confident and, they can do anything and nothing's getting in their way. And they haven't entered into that place of awareness of the outside and awareness of people's perspective on them. And around that middle school age is when they start to, and you can see it start to dampen, right? And I think that's where it all kind of begins. So I think about that a lot. Like, it would crush me if my daughter was living her life in a trance of unworthiness. And so, and this is where my leap goes to with folks that I say coach, for example, is if it would crush you to know that your child, like someone you love with all your heart, would exist in that way? Like, why is it okay for you to exist in that way? Like, why is it not good for them to be in the trance of unworthiness, but it's okay for you? It just doesn't make sense. And when that kind of clicks, you realize like, oh shoot, I need to get it together. Like that's what happened to me when I was, you know, when my daughter was young. And I'll save that story for another time, but I just kind of woke up to that. Like it just, what kind of role model am I? You know, it just, and then just the logic isn't there. So I think when all those things start to click, then it's like, oh, taking this notion of self-love seriously, like it becomes, it's not a selfish act, right? It's not a selfish act at all. It's the only way that you can, you know, kind of move forward. Anyway, I'll hand it off to you because I'm sure you have something to say about that. Otherwise I can keep going.
What I think you described there is, you know, what a lot of people end up having as those moments of when they decide to make a change, right? It means that they had a ton of pain, right? And the pain caused them, you know, people get cancer diagnosis, you know, and then it's like all of a sudden they change their lifestyle because it means something more to them than there. And I think you have to look at that. It's like, well, why is that? You know, why does that happen? And I'm a great example of it. I mean, I had a nervous breakdown when I was, you know, 21 years old, and I couldn't leave the house, and I was OCD other than going to work. You know, it was a mess, and I had to go be put on medicine and all this kind of jazz. But it took that moment for me to realize I needed to make a change. There was pain that caused self-awareness that made me make a decision to change. What I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to dive deeper a little bit into why is that. And I think part of it is about us as a species. Like we're energy, right? We're all about energy, and our bodies are constantly looking to conserve energy, right? And so to hold yourself accountable, to own who you are, to be disciplined, to do all these things take energy. So as much as it's a blessing that our bodies and our minds and everything are just unconsciously looking for ways to be efficient and conserve energy, right? It's the easy way out to associate with being a victim. It's an easy way out to just give in to the little, you know, birdie talking to your head and say, look, yeah, you know what? It's, I don't have time. I'm just going to go get more fast food or whatever the case might be. Right. So that's why when they say life is suffering, and why I have this kind of belief of discipline plus enthusiasm equals heaven on earth, that discipline part is the start. And discipline is not easy. It's hard. It takes effort to do that. And so we need to understand, you know, the gifts that we have with our minds and our bodies and what that is doing, right? Our mind is always trying to conserve energy, always trying to protect us, always trying to do those things. But you have to realize that you have a choice to listen to that or you don't, right? And eventually, as you get emotions hit you over and over again and you suffer, right? It could be a little ache and pain. It could be, tired, exhausted, whatever the case might be. Eventually, when those emotions and those maybe slight little uncomfortableness don't get your attention, the big fat, you know, cancer diagnosis or something else happens, and now you have to wake up. And so what do you have to do? You have to be proactive, right? You have to be proactive and realize that, you know, as much as you have this amazing gift of the ability to be self-aware, you have to be disciplined with it. You have to own it. And you have to, you know, take the right steps forward, which I think is a good segue into the other part of the conversation that we need to have here, which is we could talk about the philosophy of it and understanding what it means to us. But, you know, what is it that you can do to practice self-awareness? What can step you in a direction to be more self-aware, to start to see the benefits that I know I've seen and what you've seen? So what would you say is your one or two key things that you do that helps you strengthen that muscle, that self-awareness muscle?
Before I do that, because when you were talking, something clicked for me that I want to mention. Is that cool?
Absolutely.
Because you were talking about how the discipline, it can be hard. And that is true, especially in the beginning. And I was thinking about, because we were talking earlier about this notion of identity and these beliefs we hold about ourselves, where perhaps upon inspection, we find to be untrue or no longer true, right? Because we evolve as humans. And I think one of the other gifts of self-awareness for me has been a recognition of like these ideas I had about myself, like I'm not an athlete, right? And then realizing like, oh no, maybe I'm going to be an athlete. And the changing my beliefs definitely has made, sticking to these habits that I've developed a lot easier, So finding time to exercise, for example, which I know has so many positive effects for me, energy wise and health wise and mentally, you name it. I used to struggle with that, like finding the motivation. And now this is just not a struggle. It's just not hard at all because I identify as an athletic person who like needs to move my body and I need to sweat and I need to, kind of have these and push myself in this way in order to be happy. So it's become, so my identity has just completely shifted there. My identity shifted from a nutrition standpoint. And a lot of that came from my daughter and the influence of my daughter who decided to become a vegetarian at 8. And, my understanding of, the impact on industrial food production on the planet and whatnot. And my identity is, now I'll say I'm veganish because one of the other things I like to do is occasionally break a rule, definitely a rule breaker, and continue to identify as one of those. So, I'm like 90% vegan, and then I like to go all out and have an ice cream sundae every now and again, or a burger. But I know that 90% makes a difference. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because I think a lot of times I've seen that with folks, like where they identify as something that's limiting them and their potential. And I think upon inspection of that, you realize it's not true, or it doesn't have to be true anymore, right? Like we're as I think reserve the right to evolve as human beings. And that's been another gift for me of self-awareness, is just like seeing that, recognizing that, and having fun with it. Like that's the other thing. It's like it unlocks this joyful response to the challenges of life. Like it's not been easy this year, but I still feel an immense amount of joy in my day, because I realize like, I don't know, it's all within my power and my response to how I experience my day, and how do I want to experience my day with joy as much as possible, right? So anyway, I had to throw that in there. Tools.
Yeah. Well, I will say, but quickly before you go there, what you just said, I think, is a topic for another podcast, because I think there is some fundamental identities that all of us possess and should embrace that we just don't do. And I think one of them is the athlete, right? We are all athletes. If you have a body, you are an athlete.
I like it.
And we need to understand that, we are this point of consciousness, but we have this brain and we have this body that goes along with it. And we need to make sure that both are healthy, right? And both are in prime condition to be able to do whatever it is we need to do, right? You're a professional football player or tennis player. There's a different level of exercise for your body and mind that you need to do to be that. But just as that might go to certain levels, there's also a level of athleticism and exercise you need to do if you're a computer programmer, right? It is very, very important, because your body, your movement as an athlete impacts your brain, and there's just so many things. So I think that there's a good talking point, which is definitely for another day. But I love you bringing that up, because it's, for me, that is, there's a fundamental identity that I'm willing to associate, and anything else that I'm doing, I'm looking at it and want to make sure there's a good reason why I associate with being something, whatever it is, right? And I want it to be something that's serving me for good reasons, and is about my purpose in life. And anything that's not, I want to get rid of it. So
yeah, that's great.
So tools, what do you think, or one or two that you think are crucial for helping with strengthen self-awareness for you?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about mindfulness, meditation, and my journey, and just quick, and then tell the story that I was wanting to tell about the voices in my head, because it's a good one. But I started, one of the things that, in response to my burnout episode I talked about in the last episode, was to seek out some mindfulness instruction. So I found someone to coach me for about 6 weeks on mindfulness. I found that very useful. This was also 7 years ago. It was before the days of Insight Timer and Headspace and Calm. At least they weren't in the ether like they are today. But it was really great to have that one-on-one introduction at the time. And of all the things I tried at that time in response that really helped me, it was the tool that was the most impactful, and that I was most drawn to, and this is for me, and that I've most, committed to on an ongoing basis since then. And that, my journey with mindfulness meditation definitely went pretty deep, to the point where I did eventually, a couple of years in, go to a mindfulness retreat at Spirit Rock here in California. It was, once I kind of learned about this, it was on my list as this is a wonderful opportunity to challenge myself. The idea of just meditating all day, basically, was fascinating to me. And one of the things that I found in that week, there were a lot of things, and, I won't get into all, but, we had these 2 moments where we had these little group sessions, and everyone had a couple of minutes to speak. It was the only time you really spoke, in front of anyone the entire week. And one woman really articulated it really well for me. She talked about the dinner party in her head. So it's not only that there's a voice in your head, there are distinct voices. And in that week, because I got to this place of, such deep self-awareness, right? I could start to pick out these different voices, and they're showing up in these. So, and I developed personas for them. Like there was one that I called the playful puppy, who was, who would just show up and like my dog, drop the toy in front of me and just be like, let's play. And it would, and the playful puppy would be like, ooh, we should have a dinner party. Yeah, let's have it on Saturday. Who are we going to invite? And in my head, we're just like, imagining this like wonderful dinner party we're going to host, back when you could do that. And then there was like the narrator, this voice in my head who would just imagine blogging about my experiences or narrating my experiences, and I was like, whoa, that voice is around a lot. Am I living my life for me, or am I living my life so I can tell people about it when I see them next? Like just having that moment of awareness was so profound. And the most impactful moment I had was when I noticed this voice that I called the mean girl. And it was like this moment where I had decided to go and, like, in the middle of the afternoon, get go have a cup of tea and have a spoonful of peanut butter with like a little honey on it. And this is between lunch and dinner. And the mean girl like shows up and she's like, can't wait for dinner, and just being nasty to me, like you have like no self-control, and that was totally her voice. It was just like that kind of character from a movie. And I was just like, dude, back off. I am enjoying my spoonful of peanut butter. You get out of here. But it's the kind of thing that prior to that experience, all those voices were just a din, and they're coming in and they're coming out, and they're loud and they're soft, and I had no notion that there was all of this going on in my head all the time, other than it's just like this overwhelming amount of anxiety and that is happening on a regular basis. But that so I had to share that because I find that to this day mindfulness and meditation have been powerful tools, but that experience in and of itself was just like pretty profound.
Yeah, that's great, because I can relate to that myself. And what I think that something that you described, that was part of my journey, in life was having the awareness and understanding that the consciousness, the observer that I am, is not those voices, right? Yeah. And really realizing like, whoa, wait a second, like,
yes,
I kind of don't have to listen to
yes,
that
yes,
if I don't want to. I can choose to point my observation someplace else and avoid you. Wait a second. When you do that, you start to realize, and then you start to create a further separation that expands out from there. But it took a really long time through meditation and through other practices, through coaches and whatnot, that got me to that point. And there's still, I'm unraveling things and going through it all. But that moment really, I think, was a huge healing moment for me that allowed me to look at things a little bit differently, see areas where I could choose to explore, and would go from there. And uh, the one thing that I have found, and I'm exploring this a little bit further, I'm kind of trying to dive into the science of it all, but the spoken word of something out, when you like transfer from the mind to the senses, there's something in that transition that creates awareness. And I think that meditation allows you to strengthen the separation between those voices and who you are, and being the observer, right? So it allows you to take the pause and find those meta moments, as I like to say, and it strengthens the ability to be able to react in a situation where you're reacting, and pause and then be able to respond in a better way. I feel like that's what meditation has been great for me. But I also know that when I speak out loud, the concept of incantations, the concept of talking out about something, brings a level of awareness to me just kind of naturally. And I'm actually reading a book right now called Atomic Habits that talks about this, where you say something, like you're about to go take that piece of chocolate, and you literally say out loud, I know this is not good for me and I shouldn't be eating it, and I'm doing it because it makes me feel comfortable. By just doing that act alone will create another level of awareness for yourself the next time you go for chocolate, believe it or not, right? It's fascinating how that happens. So for me, when you started talking about, I'm in a pandemic, I'm doing all these things, and I want to feel joy, right? Saying the fact that I want joy, right? And some people call this prayer. This is their prayers. They say things out loud. This is what you're doing, right? You're putting something out there to help bring further awareness and bring focus and put faith in something. It's amazing how it happens. It circles you back. And when you're doing something that's against it, you have this, it's weird. It's amazing how it just sometimes pops in your mind and gives you a moment of breaking that chain that was going on. And I find that very fascinating. I'm very curious about the whole, mental to the senses connection and how that all kind of works. I do find that, just absolutely fascinating. But I find myself practicing, incantations and, call it prayer, call it whatever you want. That's part of my daily ritual in the morning. It sets a tone for where I want my focus to be. And then I also think it triggers further awareness as my day unfolds that I'm staying on task for that. And so those, for me, meditation, kind of strengthening the muscle, but then also setting intentions about where I want my focus to be, I think also helps with me from a tool perspective that, again, doesn't cost you anything to do that.
Yeah, right.
At all. Neither one of those things.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, I love that you highlighted this truth that, that we are not those voices in our head, right? When that really clicks for you through mindfulness in meditation, it's like such an aha. I know it was for me. So powerful. And I think the beginning of how you can really start to shift yourself in amazing ways. And then second, I love, this notion of incantation. That's actually new for me. And maybe there's some part of me that was doing a little bit of that naturally or not, but I'm going to dig into that. So thank you for that. That's a tool I'm excited to try and to dig into. And the other thing I wanted to mention, because I think that you were starting to kind of touch on this as well. I think it's a tool that is particularly pertinent right now, because I would say pre-pandemic, we were all go, 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 go all the time, right? And even, finding a moment for 5 minutes of meditation or taking a breath was like, okay, yeah, I'll see if I can pull that off,
Right.
But now there's space. People have space in their lives, so and probably the first time for a lot of folks to really be being, not be rushing and be in the moment. And I think even just finding an activity a day, that you do every day. So, maybe it's like drinking coffee, maybe it's brushing your teeth. Find one activity, just one short activity a day where you're going to just be so in it, like just be so aware. Like, what does it feel like? What does the cup feel like? What's the weight of it? Is it, is it cold? Is it warm? What does the coffee smell like? Take the first sip and really, that kind of experience, right? That is definitely a part of, it's a mindfulness practice of really being present and just taking your darn time, not rushing and not doing it mindlessly or thoughtlessly. I think is another tool that isn't just sitting in meditation, because I know, that when people think about mindfulness, they think about just like sitting in meditation. But everyday activities that we do every day, and finding an opportunity to really connect with it in a different way and connect with ourselves in that experience, I think it can be a really good tool too to develop self-awareness, of thinking about all the senses. How does it feel? How does it smell? What does it look like? What does it sound like? My coffee's not making very much noise right now, but
that's spot on. And who would have thought that the idea of fully focusing on a cup of coffee or brushing your teeth could make you focus better at work, help you uncover things about yourself that maybe you want to change, right? But it is that, right? Again, it goes back to, if you brush your teeth a bazillion times, you do it subconsciously, right? Like there's that learning, and the more and more we get caught by this concept of time, and that we don't have enough of it, and we have all these responsibilities and all these things, we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to grow in that way and focus on that. And I attribute to what you just said as, why do we have such amazing memories of places that we go on vacation? It's because we've never been there before. There's a connection to nature, and more often than not, I mean, most people tend to go places where there's water involved or forest involved or something natural in a lot of ways, right? That seems to be a common destination. So you have this like connection to nature, and you have this observing something for the first time. You're using all of your senses. You've never been there before. You've never seen it. So the exploration is amazing, and it feels amazing, right? And so when you start to bring that practice home and you do it with the world, unfortunately, we're not in this like beginning of humanity where every step we take in a day might be something new, right? Most things are there. And when you have technology that can show me something that only lives in the Amazon, I can actually see it on a screen, right? It's not the real deal presence, but it's like 80% of the way there, right? We have to take a step back and be disciplined in doing those things, because that keeps us focused on wanting new experiences and exploring things further, right? So as much as, self-awareness can help you heal and can help you focus on, what's important to you, it can also drive learning. It can drive education, which is one of those identities I think we all need to associate with, as a lifelong learner, right? Where life, education doesn't end when you get your degree in college or your high school diploma or whatever you consider your end of your school journey, right? That is a thing that you're doing for the rest of your life. And the only way to truly learn and experience all of those things is to dive all in, 100% focus, absorbing it and feeling it and understanding it. And that leads to a sense of purpose, that leads to a sense of understanding, and then that leads to being able to have an impact on the world and send a ripple effect out to others.
Yeah, exactly. So, I love it. So yeah, so we talked about a few tools, and I know we're getting pretty far along,
Mhm.
and for anyone who's listening to this, and we're out there, and we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. I don't know about you, but I would love to hear what other people are doing. What are
Mhm.
your sort of tools for develop self-awareness? What are you doing? What do people have any questions about anything we talked about? We're happy to answer and get engaged for sure. I know I'd love that. And I think we're also looking for any thoughts or feedback on next topics. I
Mhm.
think there's so many, just based on our conversation, there's so many places we could go. I mean, I know I am thinking of this, like, abundance mindset is something I think about a
Right.
lot. I'd love to go there, but there's so many places that we could go. But if anyone has any thoughts, we're happy to hear it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, direct message through Instagram on where the YouTube channels are right now. Cheryl and I are both putting them up on our individual pages. And we haven't kind of formalized what we want to call this necessarily just yet, but we are very responsive and we welcome the feedback. I mean, in addition to wanting to hear what you have to say and thoughts on self-awareness and the tools that you use for our learning purposes, we also want to get feedback on our message. Does it make sense? Does it resonate? Anything would be fantastic from a feedback perspective, and ideas for next things, as you mentioned, I think would be great, because I want to make sure that our conversations are pointed in the direction that that others want to hear, as
Yeah.
well as what's important to us, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so
And that's
I'm looking
helping.
forward to the next one. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
Yay.
from our last one, I know I've learned and grown, and developed deep rooted relationship with you as we evolve. I mean, everything I do it when I associate with the identity of this, I see nothing but positives that have come out with it.
Yeah.
So right now I say that I want to keep doing it. So,
Absolutely. Same here. Yay.
all right. Yes,
Great. Well,
absolutely.
thanks a lot. It was awesome talking to you, Larry, once again, and we will chat soon, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Be well.
You too.